Hey everyone, welcome back. You know how sometimes, and this happens to me all the time, you just catch yourself stuck in that mental loop?
Hmm.
Replaying that awkward encounter from like last week or stressing about that presentation that's coming up. It's like our minds are wired for anything BT the present moment.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, get this. I was reading Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now to prepare for this deep dive, which, by the way, you specifically requested.
Wow.
And he opens with this story about like a beggar. And this beggar, he's just, spending his days sitting on this box, totally oblivious to the fact that the box that he's sitting on is stuffed with gold.
Wow.
It's a pretty powerful metaphor, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And Tolle uses it to illustrate, this profound point,
Hmm.
which is that most of us are kind of, living our lives similarly unaware of this treasure we possess, this treasure of simply being. And we're just so caught up in the chatter of our minds that we miss out on the richness of the present moment.
Yeah, no, totally. Okay, so let's unpack this idea, though, about the mind being this roadblock to being present, to having this joy of being, I think is how you put it.
Hmm.
Because it's not like we can just like shut our brains off, right? We still need them for, well, pretty much everything.
Yeah, precisely. And Tolle isn't advocating for a mindless existence.
Yeah.
He acknowledges the mind's value as a tool.
Yeah.
We need it. But, and here's the catch, he argues that it becomes a hindrance when we let it define us. When we become so entangled with our thoughts that we mistake them for who we are. And that's where the ego comes in.
Okay.
He defines it as this false sense of self that's constructed by the mind and fueled by, fear and desire. And you know what? It's exhausting
It really is.
living in that space.
Yeah. So, okay. So if we're constantly operating from this ego-driven space, what's the alternative? How do we escape that mental noise and tap into that joy of being that you mentioned?
Well, that's the heart of Tolle's message,
Yeah.
is that it's about shifting our awareness, our primary dwelling place, to the present moment.
Right.
Think of it this way, like the past and future, those are like destinations we can visit when needed, when it's useful. But we shouldn't be living there full time.
Mhm.
It's like we're on this incredible journey, this journey of life, but we're so busy looking at these old postcards, or we're worried about the itinerary
Right.
that we miss the scenery that's unfolding right in front of
I
us.
see. I see. And this makes me think about something you mentioned earlier about this idea of the mind being an obstacle. And it's interesting, there's this almost paradoxical concept in the book, this idea that while we need our minds, they can also be our biggest hurdle to actually experiencing true joy. So it's almost like Tolle is suggesting we need to somehow transcend our thinking, not necessarily eliminate it altogether.
Exactly. And he uses a very compelling argument, I think, to illustrate this. He points out that even, the most brilliant minds throughout history, scientists, artists, mathematicians, they've reported that their most profound insights, they often arise during moments of mental stillness, not while they're actively thinking. For example, there was this fascinating nationwide inquiry of American mathematicians, and this included Einstein, and they actually found that active thinking was a really subordinate part of the creative process.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's more about like finding that balance, allowing space for both focused thought and then also quiet awareness.
Precisely. It's like we're learning to become these conscious observers of our thoughts rather than being, you know, completely swept away by them. And what's fascinating is that when we create this space, when we're not so identified with, this constant chatter, that's when true creativity, joy, and peace really have the opportunity to emerge.
This makes me think about the emotional side of things too, because Tully talks about how even emotions that we usually consider positive, like even love, can actually get distorted by the ego.
Yeah.
That feeling of like needing someone to complete us or loving someone for how they make us feel. Like it all comes back to the self in a way that seems a little bit off.
That's a great point. And he argues that true lasting joy and love aren't really emotions in the conventional sense, but they're more like states of being. Imagine for a moment like an overcast sky. So the sun, we'll say, that represents, true joy and love is always there, but sometimes it's obscured by the clouds of our thoughts, of our ego. And it's when we can step out from under that mental cloud cover into the present moment that we can truly, truly bask in those deeper states of being.
Okay, that analogy is really resonating with me. But I have to ask, how do we actually do that? Like, how do we How do we access that sunshine, especially, when life feels, well, more like a thunderstorm? So we've established that, accessing this present moment is kind of key, but how do we actually do that, especially when the present moment, let's be honest, is less than ideal? Like, how can you embrace the now when you're, I don't know, stuck in traffic or facing some difficult conversation, you're about to have with your boss?
Right, and that's, I think, where Tolle's advice gets really practical. He offers this technique, and it sounds, well, it sounds deceptively simple, but when you start to apply it, it's incredibly profound.
Okay.
And that is acceptance.
Okay.
He says, even when the present moment is unpleasant, the key is to accept it. And this is his language, as if you had chosen it to use it as an ally.
Okay, I have to admit that sounds a little counterintuitive. Why would I choose to experience something negative?
Yeah, and he addresses that, because it's not about choosing the negativity itself, but it's about choosing how you respond to it.
Hmm.
Think of it like this. You go to a restaurant, right? You get your order, and the order's wrong. Okay, so you wouldn't deny that the order is wrong, but you don't have to then let it ruin your entire evening.
Right.
So you can accept that the situation is what it is. The order is wrong. But then you can choose how you want to respond. Maybe you send it back. Maybe you just kind of make the best of it. But the point is you're not adding to the suffering by resisting, what is.
That makes sense. So instead of letting those negative emotions kind of run the show, it's about acknowledging them without letting them dictate our entire experience.
Exactly. And by surrendering to, he calls it the isness of the present moment.
Okay.
Even when it includes discomfort, we actually then open ourselves up to a deeper level of awareness and a deeper level of peace.
This reminds me too of all those mind traps he talks about. It's all the these sneaky ways that we avoid being present without even realizing it. He mentions things like resentment or, constantly wishing we were somewhere else, even our obsession with being busy.
Absolutely. And these traps are so common. They're almost like these default settings in our minds,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, for example, he talks about, how harmful dwelling on resentment or complaining can really be, for us. It's like we're clinging to this toxic waste dump, and then we wonder why we feel so bad.
Right.
He even compares it to psychic pollution,
Mhm.
and it impacts not only ourselves, but, everyone around us as well.
It's so true. And I know for me, when I get stuck in those negative thought loops, it really does feel like I'm just adding fuel to the fire.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the thing about these mind traps, is that they really keep us stuck in this cycle of suffering.
Hmm.
And another common one he talks about is this feeling of not being fully present in the here, right? It's like, you're at a party, but mentally you're scrolling through your phone, or you're on vacation, but you're already dreading, going back to work. And he really emphasizes the importance of fully embracing wherever we are in each moment. And he says, for any situation, we basically have three options. We can change it, we can leave it, or we can accept it fully.
And I'm guessing that the key there is to actually choose one of those options consciously rather than just, passively letting our minds kind of wander.
You got it. It's about taking ownership of our experience
Hmm.
rather than feeling like we're victims of our circumstances.
Hmm. Hmm. What about stress and busyness, though? Because those seem to be almost celebrated in our culture. If you're not constantly on, are you even trying?
It's true. Yeah, busyness can almost feel like a badge of honor these days.
Mm.
But Tolle would argue that it's actually a major obstacle to experiencing the present moment, because when we're constantly rushing from one thing to the next, our minds are always on the future. What's next? What do I need to do? What if I don't get it all done?
Right.
And so it creates this perpetual state of almost there. That just robs us of the joy of actually living.
It's like we're so busy chasing after something that we miss what's right in front of us.
Precisely. And the irony is that even when we do manage to check everything off our to-do list, there's always something else waiting to take its place. So Tolle suggests that instead of focusing on constantly doing, we try shifting our attention to simply being,
Yeah.
bringing our full awareness to whatever we're doing in each moment, whether it's, washing the dishes or attending a meeting. He calls it finding the sacred in the ordinary.
That's a beautiful way to put it. So instead of seeing these everyday tasks as obstacles to overcome. We can approach them as opportunities to practice this presence.
Exactly, and that's incredibly powerful.
So we talked about resentment not being present in the here, and even like, how even our glorification of busyness can be a trap. Are there any other kind of like mind tricks, I guess, that Tolle wants us to be aware of?
Yeah, he also points out this tendency, and I think we all do this to some extent, to dwell on the past.
Right.
Replaying old hurts or reminiscing about the quote-unquote good old days, or just, letting memories take up way too much mental space. And, he actually cautions that this habit can be aging, and not just, mentally or emotionally, but potentially even physically.
Wow. That makes me think of that old saying, like, don't let yesterday use up too much of today. It sounds kind of cliche, but it's so true.
Exactly, exactly. And the thing is that by clinging to the past, we're essentially missing out on the vibrancy, and the aliveness of the present moment.
Oh, yeah.
And so Tolle encourages us to practice, he uses this phrase, dying to the past in each moment,
Okay.
to let go of its hold on us and really embrace the freshness of now.
So it's almost like acknowledging the past, learning from it perhaps, but not letting it like define our present experience.
You got it, you got it. And then finally, there's the ever so common trap of worry and what if thinking.
Oh yeah,
Right.
all the time.
Yeah, and this one is all about projecting ourselves into this imaginary future,
Yeah.
right? A future that we have absolutely zero control over in this moment.
Right. It's like that saying, worrying is like paying interest on a debt you may never owe. Like
Yeah.
we create so much like unnecessary anxiety for ourselves.
Such a good point. And Tolle's his message here is pretty clear. We can only truly deal with and experience and hopefully, enjoy the NOW.
Right.
Right. Trying to solve these hypothetical future problems just robs us of the peace that's available to us in this very moment.
So to summarize then, it sounds like all these mind traps, they're really kind of boil down to losing sight of the now, whether we're dwelling on the past or fretting about the future or resisting what is right in front of us. It's like we disconnect ourselves from that source of true peace and joy that Tolle keeps emphasizing, which, by the way, makes me think of a question he poses in the book. And that is, can we really just think our way into like a positive reality? Like the whole like positive vibes only kind of thing.
Right, right.
It's a very popular idea, but do you get the sense that Tully actually agrees with that?
He's actually quite skeptical of that. And I think for a really insightful reason. He argues that, it's incredibly difficult, maybe even impossible, to truly know what's ultimately positive or negative in the grand scheme of our lives. What may seem like a setback in the moment could actually lead to incredible growth, humility, compassion, down the road. He even uses the example of Adam and Eve being expelled from the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
At first glance, you might think, oh, that's a bad thing. But he's saying that actually that was what seemed like a negative event was actually the catalyst for their journey of self-discovery and spiritual awakening.
That's a really interesting perspective. But I wonder, like, how would Tully then respond to someone who says, well, that's easy to say when you're not the one going through something tough. Like that whole easier said than done kind of argument.
Yeah, and he addresses that too. He's very clear that acceptance, in his view, isn't about pretending that difficult things aren't happening. It's not about toxic positivity. It's about choosing not to let those external circumstances dictate your inner state of being. It's about, and I love this phrase, forgiving the present moment, allowing it to be as it is without letting it drag us down into negativity and suffering. And he really distinguishes between happiness, which can be fleeting and dependent on outside factors, and what he calls true inner peace.
Okay.
Which is available to us, regardless of what life throws our way.
So it's about finding that place of stillness within ourselves, even amidst like all the chaos of life.
Yeah. Exactly. And that brings us to one of the, I think, most fascinating concepts in the book, which is this idea of the unmanifested.
Okay.
Now, before you think this is getting too esoteric, bear with me, because it's actually, I think, very relatable.
Okay.
He describes the unmanifested as the source of all creation.
Okay.
That formless essence that exists within and beyond everything that we perceive with our senses.
Okay, I have to admit that sounds pretty abstract. Like how do we even begin to to connect with something so what unmanifested.
Well, and this is what's so interesting is that he suggests it's actually closer than we think. You know, that state of deep dreamless sleep.
Yeah.
He argues that we actually merge with the unmanifested, quote unquote, every night,
Wow. Okay.
unconsciously. The challenge is how do we access it while we're awake? And one way he suggests doing that is using the body as a portal.
Okay. Now you've got my attention. Tell me more about this body as a portal concept.
So he suggests a very, very simple, 10, 15-minute meditation where you focus on feeling the body's inner energy field.
Okay.
And he calls this the light visualization. So you imagine this warm, radiant light emanating from within, gradually filling your entire body.
Yeah.
And the idea is that by becoming fully present in the body, feeling its aliveness, you can momentarily transcend, the physical and tap into the formless dimension within.
Wow. That's such a cool visualization, and it sounds like a really accessible practice too, It's not about escaping reality or disconnecting from the world, but it's really about like finding a deeper connection to something greater, like within ourselves, something that's always accessible.
Precisely. And that's really, I think, the heart of Tolle's message is that true lasting change and peace come from shifting our state of consciousness, not from, trying to rearrange external circumstances.
What a powerful message and such a valuable reminder, I think, especially in today's world. This has been an incredible deep dive. I feel like my mind is buzzing with new insights. So thank you so much for guiding us through Tolle's like profound wisdom. And to you, dear listener, I want to leave you with this thought. If as Tolle suggests, our perception of the world is a reflection of our inner state. What kind of world are you creating right now? That's something to ponder, as you move through your day. Until next time, keep diving deep, friends.